You guys better start selling off those old CDI games you have stocked up because it's not looking good for the market. Hey gamer girls, my name is Gunty and today we are talking about the great retro game crash of 2023. Now before I get started, one thing I do want to say is there's a lot of hyperbole around this topic, and what people mean by when they say that the retro market has crashed, they don't mean the hobby as a whole or, people's interest in playing the games has died off. What they mean is that the speculative bubble that has formed around retro games in recent years has completely popped. They're cooked. These games aren't worth what they were selling for, and I'll get into that here in a minute. But first, I kind of want to talk about how we got here, kind of the industry as a whole, and kind of speculate on this topic. And if you want more info on, what's taken place here, why this crash has sort of happened, and what the downstream effects are going to be, go check out Carl Jobst's video on the topic. He has a much better channel than mine, and he's done a lot more research, and I think he's just put together a great video on what's happening here. So go check that out if you haven't. But like I said, let me take you back to the past, so to speak. So how the hobby really started, obviously, is people fell in love with video games back in the day on the Atari 2600, the NES, N64, Super Nintendo, and the earliest sort of beginnings of this hobby were just people that used to play those old 8-bit games back in the day, trying to collect them in the 90s, trying to hold on to their childhood, a little bit of nostalgia back in the day. Now, we didn't really see inflated prices. Most people bought games off forums, they traded with friends. You went to a flea market to go see if you could, find some old games people were trying to unload, or garage sales and things of that nature. Back in this period, it was really what's considered kind of a for the love of the game type experience of what was going on. Younger kids that didn't grow up with these games weren't really interested in collecting them yet, and it was just people that wanted a little blast from the past. Now flash forward to 2010 or so, and the angry video game nerd dominates the internet. Most people don't understand is outside of sort of the gaming world and the retro gaming world, angry video game nerd was one of the most famous people on the internet, period. And he introduced millions of people into retro gaming, especially people like me. I was born in the late 90s, which is like 12 or 13, 10 years after the Super Nintendo and the NES. But through the Angry Video Game Nerd videos and Pat the NES Punk and all these other content creators making videos on old 8-bit games, I got super interested and I started collecting. And so obviously the more people that get into this hobby, that's going to jack up the prices on eBay. And that's when we started seeing, kind of these crazy prices for some of the rarer NES games. But it was mostly the NES. We didn't see crazy prices on, other consoles like the N64 or Super Nintendo. It started on the NES and it kind of worked its way out from there over time. But at this period, we didn't see, too crazy prices. A crazy priced NES game was maybe a couple $100 or a few thousand for something incredibly rare, but nothing crazy. And there was no real interest in the box games or sealed games because as a collector, those cartridges, they sat well on the shelf. They were good at displaying themselves. To me, I thought the cartridges themselves looked cooler than, having the boxes, especially for the NES. I feel like the NES cartridges looked really cool in a bookshelf type setting. Now, in this period of increased popularity, we had companies kind of taking advantage of this and trying to make a quick buck. HyperX would make reproduction game consoles, and people would make reproduction carts and try and sell them just to make some money off this increased excitement for this hobby. And so other sort of companies that were invested heavily in sort of other collectibles got interested. You had companies that did the grading for comic books and baseball cards. Companies like Wada that would start grading, sealed copies of these games. Now, like I said previously, most people didn't really care about in-the-box or sealed games, at least not the average collector. But in the world of comic books and baseball cards, the condition of items is super important in determining the value of an item and its rarity and how much it'll sell for in an auction. And so this sort of standard that existed in these other hobbies started to pollute the video game world. But it wasn't anything too crazy yet because obviously, things are only worth what people will pay for them, and people weren't willing to pay exorbitant prices for them just yet. Now flash forward to 2020 and everyone gets stuck inside during the pandemic. Many people don't have jobs, many don't have great sources of income. Some people are just kind of bored and wanting to make some quick cash while they're sitting at home doing work from home. And so we see a lot of interest in speculative markets. People are super interested in the stock market. People are super interested in crypto. People are betting the farm on NFTs for some reason during this period because everyone thought they could make a quick buck on some of these new enterprising speculative markets. And so obviously people are interested in, retro games, kind of the speculation there. We have items that are rare, and there is some demand for it. So people start throwing money at it. And that's when we see these huge auction prices, like millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars for these sealed games that really were not rare to begin with. And there's a bunch of controversies over fake sealed games, whether they were factory sealed or not, and whether or not this game is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the only reason that this is happening to begin with is because people want these speculative items. They think they're going to be rare going forward into the future. And this starts jacking up the prices of just other games, just open cartridges of, Castlevania or whatever, start increasing in prices. And really what we see start to happen is the speculative market starts to price out the hobbyists, the people that are actually into it. And so, regular people can't afford some of these games. I know N64 game prices shot through the roof. You were having to spend $80 to get pretty common cartridges. Even sporting games, it seemed like during this period, were crazy in price. And so obviously these things weren't worth this. And we saw this with crypto. People were buying crypto at rates for no reason. These items weren't worth what they were priced at. And so what we're seeing now in 2023, as people aren't as interested in speculative items and, money's kind of tight with inflation, people don't have, a lot of excess money to have invested in games. And if you have something that you don't really use or you have no interest in because you have no interest in the hobby that you only bought for a speculative reason, you're going to just have to try and sell it off. And that's what's happening right now is kind of the great sell-off of these speculative items that were purchased for hundreds of thousands of dollars being sold now for tens of thousands of dollars, which is a good thing. This is what we wanted to have happen. I mean, these people weren't into this hobby because they loved retro games or they wanted to preserve anything. They were into it because they wanted to make a quick buck, and obviously that's failed. And there's a little bit of Schadenfreude there, take a little bit of joy in their failure of them trying to bastardize something that was, for fun. And really one of the ironic things about this is that the more these people pushed for these prices to go higher and higher, really just pushed people into emulation and ROMs. I think ROMs really have kind of taken over the retro game market. Back in the day, the ROMs and the emulators, they weren't always great. They weren't, one-to-one like it would be if you were playing it on the hardware. But, technology's gotten to such a better place now that I think a lot of retro gamers, when those prices went super high, were just turned off and were like, I'm just gonna, play the ROM, load up the emulator, play it right on my PC. It's real quick and convenient. I don't have to get the cords out. I don't have to try and outbid somebody on eBay to get the game I want for a reasonable price. But I'm starting to think now that if the prices start coming down, we might see people get back into the physical side, which is something I enjoy. I think there's something about putting a cartridge into a console that is a truly great experience. And I just wanted to make this video just to throw my thoughts out there. Obviously, like I said, Carl Jobst did a much better video than I did, but I just want to share my thoughts because this is a hobby that I'm interested in. But what do you guys think? Do you think it's good that the video game bubble has crashed here in 2023, or do you think it might have some downstream effects? Anyway, let me know what you think down below in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.